Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you are in the world, and welcome to today's DevOps.com webinar, brought to you by TechStrong. My name is Cody J. Brown. I'm the host of TechStrong Learning. We have an exciting panel ahead, but first, I have a couple of housekeeping notes to cover. First, today's session is being recorded, so if you miss any of our conversation or you'd like to rewatch at a later point in time, the on-demand recording will be made available shortly after we conclude our webinar today. If you have any questions for our panel members, we want you to go ahead and send those in using the Q&A tab on the right side of your screen. And we also have a chat tab for any other comments that you'd like to make or add to our conversation today. Finally, at the conclusion of our webinar, we will have a drawing for 4 $25 Amazon gift cards, so stick around to see if you're one of our winners. So our topic today is value stream management, and I'm joined today by Stephen Walters, Field CTO for CEM Digital, X Matters, and Everbridge Company, Lance Knight, President and COO of ConnectAll, Dalibor Soroki, CEO and co-founder of Plutora, and Mike Vizards, Chief Content Officer here at the TechStrong Group. So it's my pleasure to turn the floor over to Mike to get our conversation started, but to our entire panel, thank you all so much for being here with us today.
All right, thanks, Cody, and thank you all for joining us. Let's get started with some fundamentals, and I'm going to ask Dalibor this, but what exactly do we mean by the phrase value stream management? Not everybody watching this is an expert, and it seems like it's almost a concept that may be in the eye of the beholder a little bit, at least at the moment. So what do we mean by it exactly, in your view?
Thanks for the question. So I think one of the first things is to kind of set the context, which is, well, when we talk value streams, the view of the world is that every company is a software company, and you can't just stop with saying, well, I'm going to be a software company and that's good enough. You need to be a highly performant software company. And the question then is, well, what does that mean? That is, I need to really deliver software as quickly as possible and as error-free as possible and deliver the maximum amount of value to the customer. So when we think about value stream, the value stream and value stream management is all about managing the flow of value to the customer from idea to operations, from idea into the hands of the customer and everything that happens in between. So it's the information and automation flows and everything that you touch in between creating and spinning up an idea and delivering it to the hands of the customer. There's more nuances than that, but I think to get us rolling, I think that's the way to think about it. Everything that you do to get software in the hands of the customer that adds value to the customer, everything it touches, that's considered the value stream, the flow of value to the customer.
All right, that's a lot of ground to cover. Lance, does that make sense to you, or you got something a little more granular in mind?
So the good part is, yes. A lot of times when I get on these calls, I get a different point of view than mine on what it is, right? So value stream management is human. It's a human endeavor. The humans do it. And they use solutions like ours on the phone here to help manage their value streams. But to really be able to say what a value stream management is, you have to say what's a value stream, right? And he covered that in his point of view. It's all of the steps, both value-added and non-value-added steps, to deliver products to the waiting arms of the customer. That's a value stream. And then value stream management is the process of managing that. So our point of view is exactly the same there on that. And we're seeing a lot of contrarian points of view on that. And I don't care what organization you're in, what you do, whether it's software delivery, manufacturing, whether you deliver services, everybody has a value stream and you're all already managing it.
All right. Stephen, can you add to that a little bit? Because you could argue that everything has a value stream attached to it, and therefore everything needs to be managed. So, and from your perspective, what makes value stream management uniquely different from managing any other process that we use for building software?
Yeah, I mean, I have a slightly different perspective. This is where it gets maybe a bit heated, because I know this is something I've had discussed. Well, let's put it gently, discussions with Helen Peel about. What is a value stream? Yeah, okay. Value stream management, you have to understand what a value stream is. But to understand what a value stream is, you have to understand what the value is that you're trying to create or generate or maintain within the system. So my issue is that with some of those kind of value stream definitions, they're very development oriented. They're very delivery oriented towards a software delivery lifecycle. And if we're talking about value stream management being a principle on which we're able to build and identify true DevOps, we can't ignore the operations side of things.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, I've got a very strong opinion that things like incident management, change management, problem management are also sort of streamlets. They're part of the value stream that can't be ignored. And I would go further than in the software delivery side, things like defect management have to be considered as part of a value stream. You know, we've been very guilty in the past, even back in the days of Gantt charts, of planning out our delivery according to a perfect world where everything goes from idea to delivery and nothing ever goes wrong in between. But that's not the truth of the matter. And if we really want to identify how we're both delivering and maintaining value, we need to look at the bad parts as well as the good parts. And just one final point to emphasize that. When is the most crucial time that we need to ensure that we are delivering or returning something to value in the quickest and leanest way possible? It's when we've got a major incident, when we've got a cybersecurity incident, because in those situations, every second counts. So by having incident management leaned up as part of a value stream, for me, is just as important.
Dalmor, maybe you can explain a little bit about who drives adoption of these types of platforms, because businesses have been managing processes forever and a day, and you talked about how every company is becoming a software company. But is it really the DevOps team leadership that drives this, or is it the people they work for, or is it kind of this more federated approach? Maybe this is the place where the two of those groups finally have a meaningful conversation. Explain to me who wakes up in the morning and says, I got to get me some value stream management.
Well, I think I'll kind of pick on the comment that Lance made, is that everybody already has a value stream. Everybody has a process to deliver software. Whether that's the optimal process and whether that's the most sophisticated and value delivering process is another matter. But everybody has one. So someone is already responsible for delivering software and understanding the different nuances that you go through as you move across teams. So that's already happening. When we think about who's adopting value stream, when we think about value stream management, there's often a drive to optimize the way that that's occurring. So that is understanding what it is and then looking at the bottlenecks within different elements of that chain. We've seen a shift recently. If you asked me that question probably 2 or 3 years ago, I'd say there's a centralized team or a centralized function that's driving a level of optimization. What we're seeing now is it's very product centric. It's very fragmented. There's value streams per product or per asset being delivered, and the engineering, and I know that there's ops and security people involved in the value stream, but it's typically driven by the person who's responsible or tasked with improving the application, improving the system, driving more value to the customer. So it's typically, for us, we see a lot of software engineering leaders that are driving that, typically at a director level. It comes down. For us, what we don't see a lot of bottom-up developer-centric adoption of value stream management. And the reason for that is that they're already optimized within the silos. So if you're operating within a silo, that might be testing, that might be development, that might be deployment. We see a lot of that optimized already. It's when you start to look cross-functionally across all those teams, which means that you then have to get to a certain level within the organization. We typically see that as software engineering leaders.
Yeah. Lance, do you agree with it? I mean, to your point, if everybody already has some way of managing value stream, is the way we manage value stream today just fundamentally broken? Because a lot of times, let's be honest, software development kind of looks like the sausage factory. You don't really want to know what's going on in there. You're just kind of interested in the outcome. But maybe it's time we start to admit to ourselves that maybe some of this is a mess. What's going on?
Yeah, so I'm not going to say that it's broken. It's not broken at all. You're delivering value. It's just, are you delivering value optimally? Are you looking for the value added and non-value added activities that you either need to eliminate, or you need to remove, or you need to automate? right? So when you think about it in those lens, which is the traditional values, I mean, I worked in manufacturing, so I am all leaned up with the speak for years now. And as we're trying to apply these things, we have to look at them through the lens of lean and systems thinking in order to do that. So it's more improving and streamlining and making your value streams more efficient, and actually putting under intentful management, not lack of intent management, right? You are managing a value stream. There's one there. And even if you don't know it, you are. But getting it to where you're intentionally looking at it. And when you think about it from the lines of, let's say I brought it up, I was in manufacturing, right? Those value streams are all engineered and designed for products to flow through. That's not how IT came along. IT processes and so on grew up organically most of the time in companies underneath the CFO as a cost center. Now with transformations, they're getting a seat at the C table and they don't know what to report on. So here we're looking at a shift of IT as its importance in an organization, which is bringing value stream to the forefront to look at how can I deliver things faster, more efficiently? How can I report the right things of status? How do I turn this unpredictable thing, because it just grew up organically, and find the holy grail of predictability in IT? And that's what value stream management will help you do. But we're looking at it in all these different ways. And we just have to get to the point that you have one. How do we make it better? And to Stephen's point, I can find one part of the value stream. I can improve that. I can improve feedback loops from my my incident reporting systems into development for faster mean time to repair. That's removing waste, right? That's a non-value added activity, by the way, but it's important to automate that non-value added activity. You have value and non-value added activities. And it's not that you need to eliminate all your non-value added activities. You have to figure out how to automate them, streamline them. And it's interesting, as we sit here, my solution, Connect All, is designed to help companies automate their non-value added activities. So I don't want to say that half the time, but that's the truth, right? What we do. And that's the interesting part. But it's the humans that have to go look at it, manage it, and do that. And Delaware, you're absolutely right. It is normally a director level or above. The individuals, they're working in their sprints, they're managing their Kanbans, they're doing all that. That's automated pretty well. And they're not really concerned so much about the end-to-end processes. And I think this is interesting. I'm going to make this one statement. I have been talking about breaking down these silos for I don't know how many years. And it's interesting. Over a decade, I'll age myself here. I've been talking about this. And value stream management really isn't here to break down the silos. It's to help the silos communicate at least and move things forward. So anyway, I'm sorry. You were going to ask another question, and I continued my pontification.
No worries. Go for it. Stephen, to Lance's point, do you think that IT organizations from the bottom up, as they've evolved, are looking at the wrong things, and maybe we need to figure out, how to meld that in a way that focuses them on what the business is focused on versus, I don't know, 5 nines of availability? What does that mean to anybody these days?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, let me say I agree completely with everything that Dalibor and Lance have said. And to your point, let's come out with it and let's be brave and say it. DevOps has got a problem. We have got a problem. You've only got to look at the latest Puppet State of DevOps report to see that, when we're looking in terms of the maturity of organizations, there's this mid-tier level of about 75% of organizations that are stuck there that just can't get up into that top level of maturity. And we have to ask ourselves the reason why. Now, I'm looking at it from age and experience. I've been there through the likes of CMM, CMMI, ITIL, TOGAF, Agile, SAFe, and they've all had the exact same problem. And we're getting that same problem now with DevOps. And that is that these are things that are being implemented by technologists, okay? and we love our technology. And so the answer we always think is, let's implement technology. The problem is that then we're missing so many other factors. I'm a great proponent to Jazz Humble and the CALMS framework. And the problem is that when you implement that CALMS framework, you are supposed to implement with a level balance of culture, automation, lean IT, measurement, and sharing. And the problem is many organizations go hell for leather on the automation, and we end up with a great big capital A, and we don't get that balance with the change in the culture, leaning of the IT processes, the measurement, and the sharing. So you just end up with people who they're dependent upon the tools, but in the same breath, they haven't broken down those silo walls. They're not thinking culturally about how we get rid of the blame culture, and how we ensure that we're doing the proper measurement, and are we sharing our results, and are we leaning our processes. Now, this for me is where value stream management then is potentially a huge breakthrough in this area, because as the guys have been saying, I'm now not necessarily having conversations with SREs and DevOps engineers and, the heads of IT management. I'm talking to people at that executive level, because now what's getting involved is the fact that we're talking truly about who is involved in a value stream. Coming back to your original question, the problem, a big problem we got with DevOps, and I've had this discussion recently, is people think it's just for development and operations. Well, no, you've only got to look at the DevOps handbook, and it tells you to get security involved, to get the business involved. And this is a common mistake. This is why I don't like the name DevOps, and why we ended up with all these hybrids like DevSecOps and BidOps and DataSecOps, and it does my head in. But this is the problem that we've got, and value stream management is answering much of that by saying, look, who is involved in a value stream? Well, actually, yes, it's your development teams, it's your operations teams, it's your security, it's your sales, it's your HR, it's your marketing. Everybody's potentially involved in delivering a business service. And I think that's potentially the way that value streams are going to ultimately be modeled. They're going to be ultimately modeled around a business service, because that's what has to deliver value at the end of the day. And that's what you have to maintain and you have to keep managing. So that's where value stream management makes a big difference, because it's actually got us thinking outside of the box of IT and technology alone. It's getting everybody involved. It's getting everybody in that sort of communication work. And as Lance says, it's not necessarily about breaking people out of their silos. That's fine. But, well, it's not fine, but it's about ensuring that there's that seamless communication between the two. Patrick Dubois said, in the State of DevOps report, he said, and I've got the quote here somewhere, he said about DevOps is whatever you do to bridge friction created by silos, and all the rest is engineering. And that is the key thing. It's about breaking down that friction between the silo walls, because that's what value stream management is about. Where you've got friction between silo walls, you've got waste. Let's get rid of it.
Mm-hmm. Let me follow up on that, because I read the same reports as you do, and I look at them sometimes and I scratch my head and I go, well, is everybody going to try to attain the exact same level of DevOps proficiency? Or is DevOps more like water, and each organization, it finds its own level, and my level of DevOps may not be equal to your level of DevOps for good reason. And just because I got a bunch of metrics on one side that says, this is my perfect instance of DevOps, doesn't mean that I'm not enjoying DevOps, or I'm not, willing to throw away the term altogether, since we are, after all, publisher of DevOps.com. We have a point of view. But anyway, what is your sense of, does everybody need to do DevOps just perfectly well, or can it be just to the point that I need it and I'm good?
Go on, I'll get straight into that one. Yes and no. There is an element of just enough, of doing just enough, as has come from the agile world. But there's also an element of continuous improvement. If you don't adapt and change and meet the new criteria that's coming at you, if you don't develop, if you don't improve, then you're not standing still, you're falling backwards. Others are going to overtake you in terms of what's going on. So value stream management is as much a continuous improvement platform as anything else. I have a rule, which is the only constant in the universe is change. So we have to be able to understand how we can manage that change and do so in as least disruptive a way as possible. And value stream management does provide that using the proper manner and techniques. So I don't know if that goes towards answering your question in that, everybody has a level, because everybody has a different culture. Every organization has a different culture. Every organization has different values. DevOps is unique according to whichever organization you go into. And that uniqueness, it can change just from one person leaving an organization or a new person coming in, because they change and they influence the culture in some way or another. And depending upon who they are, if they are a highly influential person, they could highly influence that culture within the organization. And so that uniqueness changes again. So for every organization, it's understanding what your level is that you want to achieve and understanding whether you are delivering, maintaining the best value possible. And that really should be the measure as to whether you're in that mid bracket or in that high tier bracket. I think what that report showed was that a lot of people feel as though they've still got further to go. They are not delivering the value that they expected to get from their DevOps transformation. There's something missing.
So Delbor, let me follow up on that with you then. Do you see most of your customers, are they like comparing themselves to some other organization, or to Stephen's point, or are they just kind of saying, this is where we are at point A today, and we just want to get better tomorrow and we move along our journey from there? But we're not really kind of looking over our shoulder at everybody else. We're just kind of saying, this is where we are and how do we get better?
I think a bit more context would be that every organization is spending insane amounts of money on software, and there is a source of competitive advantage if you can do that better than your competitors. Obviously, Lance and I, we both provide a platform who can crank out the most features, within a budget is better, right? Like that's, so there is this comparison. But I don't think there's a standard set of metrics yet that organizations can compare, because obviously there's a set of principles, as mentioned. We want to do better. There's a set of objectives. We want to be able to deliver, throughput or defect counts at a particular level, but that's then shaped by the constraints that you have within the organization. I think the way that I'd probably say practically what we see, rather than people looking at metrics, what they're looking at right now, or have been looking at, is, okay, I've adopted a particular set of developer technologies. I've optimized within my silos, and because I'm doing cloud, because I'm doing automated deployment, because I'm doing automated testing, that's the driver. The implementation of the technology, or the implementation of this local optimization within a particular silo is, I'd say, where we've seen DevOps over the last couple of years. Now the question is, how do you start to optimize across those silos? And that's next level of difficulty, because you then have these cross-functional teams that you're trying to organize, and you're trying to do it in a way where you've got these information flows. And as Lance and Stephen mentioned, it's the glue that binds those together, which allows you to maximize the throughput. And so I think DevOps and that glut in the middle is, we're optimizing silos, largely complete, or we finished testing, we finished automated deployment. How have we done that? And now the conversation is very much around optimizing across those silos. So it is difficult to compare, but we would say it's been focused on the adoption of the technologies rather than the outcomes, and this gives you the ability to measure and view the outcomes as you've implemented across those teams.
Lance, you said value stream management, or at least it works, or it's not broken. And I would talk to a developer, and they would probably beg to differ. And here's what their issue is. They're going to be like, I have all these wonderful tools that I use to build my applications, and we all have this tool or framework, and it collects data. And today, the current process is somehow or other people are walking around that process and saying, well, let me, get you to enter some data here that tells me how you're doing on your project, and then I'll collect all that data, and then I will, report the value stream back to the organization. And the developer looks at them and says, I'm not doing that. everything that you need to know is already in my tool and in my platform, and you should figure out some way to pull that stuff out automatically and not make me actually sit around and create reports for you. So if we are asking developers to create these reports, maybe the whole value stream process is broken and we need to think about it differently. What do you say?
Well, you have to define broken. Right? So when you define broken, to me, that means you're not delivering value to your customer. Mm-hmm. So if you're not delivering value through your value stream, meaning what is value is always the big thing we all talk about. What is value? To me, it's a product or service to the waiting arms of the customer. That's the value. If you're not doing that, then you're broken. But most of the time, that is still happening in some way. Maybe not efficiently. Maybe not in the best way. Maybe without continuous improvement. But still, it's still doing that. You're still doing it. Now you can make it better. A couple thoughts I had when Stephen said is, I think, Stephen, you said something about the only constant of change. The only constant is change. I believe I was the first one to say that 20 years ago. I just wanted to get that out there. Just kidding. But I remember saying that in the past. And so, I mean, it's not broken if it's delivering value is the bottom line to your question. And the goal is to remove the non-value added activities, just like we were just talking about, to be more effective, to focus on the value added activities. Right. And there was another point about buying a tool. Value stream management isn't a tool. You can't go buy a value stream management thing. You can go get a value stream platform like Platora and ConnectAll. But we're not going to do that. We're not going to do the analyzing of it, looking at your value stream. Our product platforms aren't intuitively going to find all that waste and remove it. What we will do is help you analyze your platform and tell you how to use our platform to remove waste and start small and find those areas where I could do something very simple to automate in my platform. But no solution or application is going to make you better at DevOps or value stream management. You have to go and learn these principles as an organization that I have learned through years. Somebody said something close to Liam Neeson's. There's a particular set of skills that right? So, understanding lean principles, understanding value stream management. I've read all this kind of stuff where value stream management, there's a book out there, 8 things of value stream management. And 3 of them are find a value stream, map it, improve it, start again. That's continuous improvement, right? Start again. So there's no tool that's going to make you great at value stream management. And also, Stephen said that value stream management starts from idea to code and production and feedback loops and all these other things. That's absolutely true. It's not just the 9th mile, it's the whole mile of how that's management. And we've been down this pathway of turning IT from managing things that come in like projects and putting them into flows for a long time. It was a 3-tiered governance model I deployed at a company, I don't know how, 10 years ago, that turns these things into product flows. And it's been a long time that we've been doing these types of things of managing portfolios in organizations. All that has to be looked at, because if you're still just managing work intake in a project way, that's a part where you can improve your value stream. Anyway, I think I answered your question and then added on to a whole bunch of fun little humor there.
All right. Well, let me reduce some of what, because I would say what Lance is really saying here is that value will be delivered. The only thing that is unknown is how much pain will be experienced along the way. So.
Right. Agreed. How many times you got to copy tickets, or how many times you got to fill in data, or how many tests have to be done, right? And by the way, this will get some contrarian points of view. Testing is a non-value added activity. I'm not telling you not to do it. That's not what I'm saying. It doesn't bring value to the customer. And that is a debate that I think will be fun to have over the next couple of years, because I'm sure somebody's going to bring that back to me.
All right. Well, while you're kicking cans, is security a non-value added thing or a value added thing?
It's non-value added.
All right. Stephen, what do you think?
No. So,
you got to look at the trick. I'm not saying not to do security. Don't get me wrong. But if being more secure doesn't bring value to the customer, then that's the debate.
That comes down again to what is the definition of value.
Right.
Because the traditional way that we look at things, when we determine the term value, we immediately think dollar signs, pound symbols, euro symbols, yen symbols, whatever. It's monetary. The thing is, though, that value isn't necessarily all of that. There are several other values that we like to consider. Customer journey time, net promoter scores. These are things which are important to a business as well. And as a result of looking at those values and implementing those values, they naturally bring about additional revenue and additional monetary requirements. And I would add into that the security element, because the fact that if you as an organization can prove to an outside organization that you have the secure elements in place, you have the correct certifications, the correct structures, the correct, you are performing the correct security testing, the correct security monitoring, all of those kinds of things, that builds confidence in your organization. It builds more confidence than an organization which basically operates like a leaky tap. You know, you want something that is, and that in itself then generates additional revenue as a result. I'm very firmly of the belief that any organization, as part of their values, their business values, should identify security as being very highly up there. If you are going to an organization that does not value security, you have to beg the question as to whether your information is going to be secure with that organization.
So again, I'm not saying not to do any of that. For goodness sakes, we go through all of that, right? I'm saying at this minute point of what's valuable to the customer. So let me break it into two pieces, because this will help too. Is writing secure code a value-added activity? Is that valuable to the customer?
Look, I think, I mean, we're talking nuances here. I think at the end of the day, you're saying we need to be at a point where the customer is getting software that is secure, highly performant, defect-free, right? So, and there's a whole bunch of other non-functionals that go along with that.
Yeah.
So everything that's involved in getting that highly performant, secure, defect-free software into the hands of the customer is valuable to the customer, because if it's not there, they're not buying your product. So that's the way I think about it, very simply. So I think, whether it's value add, non-value add, it has to be done, it has to be measured, it has to be improved, and it has to be optimized as part of the value stream.
All right, Dalmore, let me follow up on that for a minute. So I think a lot of people get lost in the metrics and all the things you can measure. So are there certain things that you're supposed to be measuring that are value stream metrics that are different from the metrics that everybody who runs around and chases in the DevOps world today?
Yeah, and it comes down to when we typically think about a lot of the DevOps metrics, we think about that as, I think about them as being local optimization in that, and going back to your question, how does a developer think about that? Our response would be, well, a developer shouldn't have to think about it, but they should have an area where they can actually understand the upstream and downstream impact of the work that they do. So our value prop, and I'm sure Lance is the same, is that we don't disrupt or interrupt the current flow of a developer. We'll present the data, and then using that data, you can then optimize. But there's a lot of metrics that are very siloed specific. So you're operating in a silo, whether that's development, whether that's testing, whether that's security. Here are the items and the things that are relevant to you. But when we get to cross-functional nature, it's the DORA metrics that are probably the most prevalent and most standardized on at the moment. So that's the metrics across flow are the ones that we would say cross-functional, upstream, downstream. You need to have those considerations. They're the ones that are really important.
Lance, can I collect those kinds of metrics without freaking the developers out? And I ask the question because a lot of times when corporate shows up, and they say, we've got this great platform, the developer's immediate first reaction is, I like my tools as they are. And by the way, if I want to get a new tool, I want to be able to get a new tool. And so how do I collect those value stream metrics in a way that doesn't compromise the independence of the developer team that wants to be able to pick its tools and move along and not be constrained?
Mostly I'm focused on how I can get more oohs out of Steve. But and I say these things to be contrarian. However, yes, absolutely. It should not, capturing that information should not even fall on the need of the developer to do anything but work on their things they need to work on within their particular, whatever they're doing, whether it's Kanban or Scrum or Safe or Water Scrum Fall. All that should be just something that they're not even thinking about. But unfortunately today, that's not true. Every organization has a person that runs around and says, I need metrics for the CIO. Please fill in your stuff. They should do their work, whatever that is, and those metrics should come out in the tools that they already have, right? We don't have to implement new tools and do all that. And systems should be able to get that information to provide those metrics. Now, you take that question one level up and say, what metrics should I be looking at the C level? That's the question. Because that question is also blurred too to me. Because every time I talk to an analyst or talk to other people and they want to talk about value stream management metrics, I think the industry that we're in is also getting confused saying, oh, value stream management, that's these metrics. It's not. That's a part of it, yes. And some of those metrics that we've been talking about, specifically the flow metrics that come from traditional value stream, do not necessarily completely apply to software development and delivery. And if you spend any time in software where you're actually writing code and you're managing backlogs or doing whatever, you'll start to see where, things like cycle time, I call that a feckless metric. It brings me no real understanding because of the size of the backlog and how things get prioritized and pushed through a backlog. Because the most important things are going to come into your backlog, get prioritized by somebody who runs a company like me or Daliber to say, we're doing that. And then it mows right through. When something else sits at the bottom of the backlog, could be there years. That blows off cycle time. That's not like manufacturing, right? Manufacturing, material comes in the door in a batch, it gets worked on, and it's pulled around to the cells and it goes out the door. Always the same every time. So we have to figure out how to use the flow of different metrics to make change in your organization. And some of these metrics can't do that in software delivery and development. It doesn't totally apply the manufacturing to the software delivery world. A lot of the concepts apply, yes. Continuous improvement, be lean, pull versus push, all those things, right? So it's very interesting. So I answered your question, no, it should have no impact on the developers. And then I went off on another topic.
Mike, another thing I might mention here is that the reason that it's hard and the reason that it's challenging to get from a developer's tool chain is that, as we've talked about, it is idea to hands of the customer, right? So that's the breadth. So value stream by its nature is a lot broader and spans a number of different functions other than just development. So we've talked about security being plugged in. We've talked about cyber being plugged in. So those things are all relevant. And what that means is that you then, in terms of how the sausage is made, in terms of producing the metrics, you need to come up with a common data model. And that common data model needs to span, spinning up ideas on one side and putting it into the hands of the customer and measuring value and feedback loop and all of that on the other side. So that common data model is quite broad. It's got a lot of data. So it is very much a data-centric play in value stream. I mean, we talk about process, but the underlying data that provides the glue and the insights and the information across the teams is quite significant. And I think that's why it's harder for companies to just go to the development team and say, well, give me the metrics out of this particular silo. You need that common data model. You need to bring all the information together. You need that glue because the information is in the glue that binds those teams together and measuring the sort of the flow and the inputs and outputs out of each team.
And then go across multiple tool stacks.
Yep. I've just scribbled some notes down just based upon some of the information that said, because I think it's important that it comes back to Lance's point about non-value add exercises. That's what metrics are. It's another example of a non-value add exercise, but it's important that you actually do it, because without it, how do you know you're actually even delivering value unless you're measuring value? You've got to have something in there that measures it. But it's another example of where it's actually a disruptive exercise. We talked about it being disruptive to the developer and having to produce those reports for the person who's wandering around. I want my reports, I want my information. It's about then bringing in that automation, so you haven't got that person running around and chasing people up for those reports and that data. That's a classic example of where that automation can remove that waste and then remove that disruption. It's the same in terms of that incident management, in terms of the defect management. These are all things which take the developer away from that important value add exercise that they need to do. I mean, even today in DevOps, you're talking, I think it's, we did a survey recently, 74, some developers are spending 74% of their time just dealing with incidents, trying to fix incidents within production environments. So that's only 26% of their time on actual value add exercises. And this is because we need to automate, we need to remove the waste, we need to take that burden away from them of all the manual exercises that they shouldn't have to be doing. Just with regards to the metrics themselves, I know we've heard mention of DORA and so on. I'm actually going to get a bit more fundamental. I don't care what metrics they are, so long as somebody actually measures, because the number of times that you see an organization and they don't do the metrics because they don't see it as a value add. It's not until later on that then becomes, an actual problem. And then you can get into understanding what are the important metrics. And I agree with Lance, because 5 years ago, I don't think I ever went to a single meetup where they did not mention about Netflix doing 100,000 builds a day. So what?
So what? Yes, amen. So what? I totally agree with you there. And you're delivering no more value on each one of those.
No, exactly.
Right? Now, I do believe in incremental delivery.
Yeah.
That reduces defects and other issues, but every minute,
it's a pointless metric.
It is.
Well, let's talk about metrics there for a minute, Stephen, because some organizations, I might argue, they get it in their head that the metrics are going to enable them to be more like a factory, right? They're going to be so efficient. They're going to be a factory, manufacturing of the terms the boss uses. And the developer sits there and says, this is an art. This isn't something that I can, automate to the nth degree. So what is the right balance to strike with the metrics in the first place if you're management and you're dealing with a bunch of developers who are artists? And how do I, get them to pay attention to the metrics without losing them? Because a lot of developers I know won't work for what they perceive to be a factory.
Yeah, and the key point is there that the metrics have to be meaningful. But the meaningful, the meaning is different to different people. People have different perspectives. How a CTO or how a CIO looks at the metrics that he wants and that he sees are completely meaningless to that DevOps engineer or that site reliability engineer. He's got a different set of metrics that he needs to look at. So it's a matter of perspective. It's something I've learned, from TOGAF. You look at things from the scenario and the perspective of that person. What is important to them at that period in time? The worst thing you can do then is just bombard them with all of the metrics that everybody has and tell them these are all important, because that's when people will lose focus on what is actually important. So the key thing is have the right metrics for the right audience that you're going to, but those metrics have to rely to have to be relative to the value that you are actually trying to deliver. So if the core value for you at that moment in time is, we need greater reliability on our platform because we're having 5 outages a day and we're losing customers as a result. So therefore, you've got more of a quality focus as a value. That's something that you need to look at, having that greater stability on your platform. So therefore, the number of defects you're dealing with on each occasion, the severity of those, how quickly you're fixing them, your observability capabilities in terms of getting that fixed before someone even identifies it as an issue. Those are important metrics, but they're not necessarily important to your developer who wants to get things out through the pipeline a lot quicker. So, it's perspective, and it's having it linked to what your overall value is.
Well, we use, so I'm a fan of goal question metric for that kind of stuff. GQM helps through that. And it's not just, it's not just a metric. It's which one, what's the goal, what's the question, and what's the metric. And it's kind of what you touched on as we're going through that.
Yeah.
Dalbor, are there best practices for metrics and how to use them? What's your thought here?
I think what I was going to chime in with what Lance said, which is metrics fundamentally answer a question, and that question that you're answering, you either confirming that you've got the right action, but fundamentally you're saying, I'm producing this data point or metrics to answer a question, and that question, based on the anomaly, as I'm getting closer or further from the objective, then requires some action to be taken. So I think fundamentally you're trying to understand the business, the flow better, so that you can then take corrective action, ideally before it occurs, or it spirals out of control. But that's the thing. It's metrics are produced to answer a question, and the question that different people are going to be asking is different. Developers can answer their question, testers can answer their questions from within the tool chain that they already have. But as an executive, you're lacking the understanding of the end-to-end flow. So, they're the questions that we think about. And if I was to say, well, what does value stream look like in a couple of years? Or maybe it's 3 years down the track. It's, well, rather than producing a metric, you turn up in the morning and Siri or someone tells you this project's going off the rails, or you need to look at this a bit deeper. So that predictive piece to actually understand where things are going off the rails and where you can further optimize, that's what the metrics are pointing to.
They do help you be more predictable.
Yeah, and to that point, Lance, we are seeing a lot more projects are being launched by organizations in the wake of COVID. They're all trying to drive digital business transformation initiatives. There's a lot more focus on developer productivity, but do you think organizations have an appreciation for the dependencies between all these projects? And part of this whole manufacturing idea is, they don't realize that somebody's 6 months behind on a project that's now going to impact 6 other projects downstream, and they don't have any visibility into that. And maybe part of this issue is just kind of thinking about and understanding that nothing stands alone anymore. Everything's a microservice to everything else, right?
So I don't know if we're looking at, developer productivity is a very interesting can of worms that you opened there for a brief moment. I'm going to shut that. I put down there. But what we can do is help them focus more in a productivity way. Mm-hmm. And that focus could be not by removing some non-value add activities that they have to do. Not having to, look at 4 systems or lose focus and just do what they do, which is, and I know when I'm code, it's a very intense thing, and nobody ever wants to talk to me because I won't pay any attention to them because I'm coding, and allow them to do that. But when you think about what we're trying to do with value stream management, it's removing that non-value added activity so they can just do that. And the metrics will help us do that. And if we can look at teams and say, which one's taking this much time or that much time, we can then go and look at it and say, oh, that's because this team has to do all this extra stuff. Or why does it take this much time to move that code to production? Well, there's extra 2-week quality step. Okay, what's that for? And then you go in and analyze that, right? Find a way to improve that, automate it, do whatever you need to do, and then you're going to move code to production quicker.
Stephen, I don't think most organizations are not doing value stream management, or at least not deeply. So what's your best advice to how to get started with this? I mean, do I just kind of like jump in whole hog, or should I incrementally do some things to set it up in the right way so that I am going to get the right outcome? Or do I just kind of throw everybody in the deep end of the pool and hope for the best?
Yeah, and I mean, there is a train of thought out there that, before you can do value stream management, you've got to do DevOps. And before you do DevOps, you've got to do Agile. No. value stream management will help you to get DevOps, and it will help you to get Agile. That's really part of its purpose. So there's a two-part sort of answer to this. Yes, you really need to go whole hog on value stream management, but what you do with value stream management means you need to bring about incremental change. So you don't go the whole hog and think, right, we're going to suddenly be DevOps overnight as a result of this. So it's having that right approach. Study what you need to study, understand about value stream management. There are challenges. I mean, don't go into value stream management blindly. There are challenges. I mean, there's a value stream management implementation roadmap, which is available, which was published as part of the first State of Value Stream Management report that came out last year from the VSM consortium. And within there are seven stages, and each of those stages has their own challenge. So identifying your value. Do you really understand what your value is that you're trying to deliver? Organizing around value streams. Well, we've gone from organizing around projects to organize around products, and now you're asking us to organize around value streams. And that's a bigger part of the organization, not just development and operations, as we were discussing. Mapping that holistic view and doing so with an open mind. The connecting. We've talked a lot about automation, but we will never be fully automated. As much as we talk about AI and machine learning and so on, there's always a human element. And as I say, humans are not tools, but they're still part of the tool chain. There are still decision criteria that have to be made in there. There's risk management that has to be done that involves that human element. And at the end of the day, it's the human brain from a developer's perspective or an operations person's perspective that helps us to deliver that value or restore that value. Inspecting, we've talked about that. What are your metrics? How are you going to measure? Adapting in an iterative and continuous way, and then incorporating that into what a true vision is for your organization, the way that you're going to go forward. These are the things that you need to identify. They're not easy to do, but just take the time, first of all, to understand what that roadmap is and understand what you need to do at each stage. And it can actually be a real benefit and really help you no matter where you are in your maturity life cycle or where you feel you are. It is there as a tool to help you get that improvement from there. So go for it. Go for value stream management. It makes a difference. Even if your value stream management itself is not perfect to begin with, it's part of the learning process that you can adapt and get better at it.
Lance, what do you see people who succeed with value stream management doing early? What is the thing that, when you look at those customers and you say, wow, these guys have a consistent pattern, or there's something that they all do that allows them to kind of wrap their arms around this sooner than later?
So I'm going to say that the people who are going to be successful with this are going to stay to the core of what it is. They're not going to get wrapped up in all of the PhDs that are trying to invent this thing. It's been around for decades. I learned it in the 80s, walking the shop floor. So if you're going to be successful with this, make it easy. Map your value stream. Look for waste and remove it. You don't have to have a daily stand-up on your value stream management initiative. You don't need to go off and figure out how to introduce value stream terminology into everything that you do. Map your value stream, look for waste, and start removing it. And you'll be successful with it. I have held, I don't know how many large whiteboard meetings with high-level companies, starting from code into production, and big whiteboards, and putting all the tools, all the processes, all the steps. And within that first meeting, you can find waste and have a plan to remove it. Don't make it a thing. It's not a cultural. It doesn't need cultural thinking, but it's not this thing that is what I think sometimes we're making out to be.
We're
It's
not
very straightforward.
We're not going to have the debate on it for 5 years like we did over the question, what is DevOps?
Right. I still don't have an answer for that. It's not. It's value stream management. So don't make it a thing. Map your value stream, find waste, talk about removing it, and do it. It's that simple. And that doesn't mean that the waste you find is a tool you need to buy.
Cool.
I hope
Dalmor,
it is sometimes, but it's not, right? So anyway.
Dalmor, what's your best advice to folks? You guys have seen a number of these implementations. So what do you got for us for get started, how, when, and where?
Yeah, I wish in this case we invented the Nike logo where it's just do it, right? But the issue here is that there's been a lot of education over the last couple of years, and now people are really looking at how do I get it done? So people are coming to us, and I'm sure coming to Lance, and really they've educated themselves and they buy into the vision, they see the value. The question now is, what is that on-ramp? So I think the key thing for us now is how do we make it simple for someone to consume, and where do you start? So I think the starting point is there, but it's having an on-ramp and making that really clear. So what the thing that we see as being the critical success factor in any implementation is that it comes back to the people and the sponsor. If we've got a strong sponsor that has a strong journey about value stream management, it gets done. If there's people that are continually, we're not mature enough, we need to do this before we can get onto it, we'll be talking to them 3 years down the track. So I think the key thing is a sponsor who's willing to take that first leap of faith, and typically that's around objectives for a particular line of business which isn't performing or they've got issues with. That could be I've got a particular asset where I've got defect and incidents are a real big problem. I've got another one where I've probably got a greater level of cyber risk. Those type of things where they're solving actual problems in a tangible way, that's the on-ramp. And from there, you bolt on more and more. We'd probably say that the top-down approach is a bit more challenging because it just takes so long. So it's just do it, get started, pick a team, pick a line of business, and pick the project or the product with the maximum amount of risk, and that's having the biggest amount of problems. And then you can really tangibly identify, here's the value that we're going to add to that particular product.
All right, guys, time flies as we're having fun as always, and we're out of that. So I'm going to hand it back to Cody, and he's going to take us in the outro. I want to thank you all for sharing your knowledge and expertise, and I, for one, learned a few things myself.
I'd like to quickly remind our audience that today's session was recorded, so you'll be receiving an email shortly with a copy of today's session, so you can rewatch or share it with a friend if you'd like. Quickly, I'd also like to announce that we do have 4 $25 Amazon gift cards to give away. So our 4 winners are Marriott R, Bonnie B, Martin W, and Naresh C. So keep an eye on your inbox to claim those gift cards. And if you don't see an email, just check your spam folder. Stephen, Lance, Dalibor, Mike, thank you so much for taking time to be with us today, for providing your expertise and your insights. We really appreciate all the hard work that goes into these webinars.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey, thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Right. And of course, before we sign off, my final thanks goes to our audience. We appreciate you being here with us today. Please take a moment to fill out our post-webinar survey, and we hope to see you at a future TechStrong Learning webinar. Have a great rest of your day, everyone.